Welcome everyone to our latest Next Practices weekly call here from I4CP. If you're not familiar with I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We have these calls called Next Practices Weekly, where we cover all different areas of human resources, from total rewards, talent acquisition, learning and development, HR strategy, culture, every Thursday from 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific time. These are 1-hour sessions. Please open the chat, keep it open throughout the call. That'll be your opportunity to interact with us, interact with our guest, who we'll be introducing in just a moment. If you're not familiar with I4CP, again, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We do this through our research studies, where we tease out what high performance organizations do differently than low performers in our surveys and in our qualitative research. We conduct a lot of interviews of HR leaders across really all different organizations. You can see here what we mean by high performance. We like to look at what the top quartile of organizations are doing differently in their practices from the lower quartile. We are a member-based organization. Here's just a small smattering of the logos of some of our I4CP member companies and organizations. It spans government, nonprofits, obviously, businesses across all different industry sectors. You see healthcare organizations, big tech, manufacturing. You see big companies like Amazon and Accenture and Microsoft, as well as some smaller companies as well. We've got a nice cohort of startups and unicorns as members of I4CP. So it really ranges across all sizes and scopes. If you're with an I4CP member company and with us today, special welcome to you. If you're not with an I4CP member, but would like to learn more, feel free to reach out to me or any of other I4CP colleagues, or just visit our website at i4cp.com and you can get more information there. My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and this week I've got the pleasure of co-hosting this call with our Chief Research Officer, Kevin Martin. Good morning, Kevin.
Good day, Tom, and hello to everyone. Always a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you with us. You're going to be leading the conversation with today's special guest in just a couple minutes. But before we get to that, as I've noted, this is a weekly call, the Next Practices Weekly series. You see the upcoming dates. Next week, we'll have an HR leader from Walmart joining us. We'll take the following week off because here in the United States, that is a holiday week, the 4th of July holiday. So we won't have a session on July 6th. We will be back, though, on July 13th. We'll have a couple of our colleagues, Kevin Martin, or Kevin Oakes, rather, and Molly Lombardi will be sharing some of our latest research on productivity. We've just finished writing up a report called The Productivity Predicament that will be coming out very soon, and we'll be sharing some of the key findings with you on the 13th. And then on the 19th, Kevin Martin will be joining Molly and doing the same basic rundown of the key findings, but targeting the EMEA audience. So that one will be at a different sort of day of the week and a different time. All of this can be found out at our website, of course, where you can get information on all the upcoming sessions. Zeta has put the link to that in the chat. Encourage you to register for all the sessions, get them on your calendar. We do record them, and there's a full archive going back a couple of years now. And so if you ever miss one, can't attend it live, you can always watch the recording later. Wanted to note, I just mentioned our productivity predicament report that'll be coming out very soon. The current study that's in the field is on AI and HR. Obviously, ChatGPT sort of exploded the nascent world of AI and automation that had been percolating in the business world, in the HR realm for several years. We had done a study on this several years back, but the new thing really is generative AI, ChatGPT and Midjourney and various other tools from Google and Microsoft, really taking the world by storm. And so we're looking at what are the implications and the opportunities and the risks for using AI in organizations today. This study is live and in the field. Zeta has once again put the link for that in the chat. If you or others at your organization haven't already done the survey, we'd encourage you, click that link, get it open in your browser, come back to it after the call today. We'd really love everyone on the call here to participate in that. people who participate in our major studies like this are the first to receive the results. But in this case, we're also making available live results. So that's something new we're doing for this study. So you'll get an opportunity to get some pretty quick insights if you participate in this survey. All right, with all that preamble out of the way, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Kevin Martin, and he's going to introduce today's special guest.
There we go. Unmuted. Thanks, Tom. Hey, everyone, I'm super thrilled to be able to introduce Sarah Hansen. And Sarah, in full disclosure, is a member of our Chief HR Officer Board, which is a group of HR officers that we convene on a regular basis to try to not only have community, but really provide the best forward-looking thinking that we can. And Sarah has graciously shared a lot of what she's done with Dutch Bros, with that group and with our other communities. And I cannot wait to see what the next phase in your growth cycle is here, Sarah. So welcome. And why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the team a little bit about you and Dutch Bros.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks, Zeta, for the music choice. I needed a little inspiration to be brave and kind of facilitate this conversation. But we're a drive-through coffee company. I say coffee in quotes because we really do serve a variety of beverages, but we're considered a drive-through coffee company in the QSR space. Known to be a fun-loving, mind-blowing company that makes a massive difference one cup at a time. Opened up in 1992 in a little town called Grants Pass, Oregon. For those of you on the West Coast, many of you are probably familiar with Dutch Bros Coffee because we've pretty much taken the West Coast by storm, but predominantly a franchised operation up until 2017, at which point we kind of converted over to run mostly company-owned stores. We continue to have our existing franchisees who can grow, but all new locations are company owned. We're currently in 14 states. We'll be 16 before the end of the year. About 750 locations, just a tick under, and a little over 20,000 employees that work for us. And as of 2021, in September, we became a publicly traded company. So that's a little bit about our business. Myself, I've been with the company for 11 years next month. So I've really watched it grow. Our HR department started as 1.5 FTEs, and that included me. And as of this morning, we're at 61 employees in the HR department. So we've expanded pretty rapidly in what I would consider a pretty short amount of time. We have a very aggressive growth strategy targeting around 150 shops per year, with a target of at least 800 by the end of this year. So pretty exciting, pretty fast, pretty agile, doing a lot of work in a lot of spaces all at once. So, but happy to be here.
Yeah, Sarah, I mean, it's such an amazing growth story. Before we get into the stuff that we're going to talk about here, but just so people can really understand the growth that you're going through, I was reading your financials, and year over year at the end of Q1 of this year, you had expanded stores by 25%. I think it was total stores year over year, 25%.
Yeah, when we say aggressive, we mean aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're our path is what we call the smiley face. So our growth. So for those of you that are maybe in the central northern part of the country, sorry, it's going to be a while before we get to those spaces, but we're traveling along the south right now, and we're kind of going to be coming up through to about Virginia on the East Coast. And I think we're targeting by 2030 to have 4,000 shops open. That's our goal. So
wow.
Yeah.
And
On that front, I just wanted to note, I'll be watching the chat, and I encourage folks to use the chat today to ask questions of you, Sarah, and I'll curate through those. But you're getting some kudos right off the bat just for Dutch Bros. Jean Gleason said, yay, so happy to see them in Kansas now.
Yes.
So you're definitely already in the mid part of the country. And a couple of others, very big fan of Dutch Bros and the sticker drops. I'm not familiar with that.
Yes, once a month. First Wednesday.
Yeah, and then and someone else said that they had the Snickers coffee a million years ago. Yum.
Okay. Very nice. We've got a fun one coming out for the 4th of July weekend, so keep your eyes peeled. It's a doozy.
Wow. Hey, and you heard it here first, folks. That's why we're on the cutting edge of next practices. And hey, Sarah, just real quickly, because I think this fits really well, at least in my warped mind. I think it fits so well into where we're taking the conversation today. But given Dutch Bros' purposeful move towards company-owned and operated stores. So right now, probably what, 2/3 of your stores are company-owned and operated versus franchised?
About a tick over half at the moment, but
Okay.
moving very quickly to the 2/3 mark for sure.
And what percentage of those company-owned stores are the store managers people who came up from within the ranks at Dutch Bros versus being hired externally?
Thanks for asking. 100%. So we only grow from within. So you enter in as a barista, but in order to become a leader in what we call our four walls, so within the shop, you have to be a current employee. We don't hire management levels from the outside.
I mean, that to me is like a drop the mic moment, right? I mean, how many organizations can provide that, right? I mean, you literally, this pipeline, this Gen Z is so critical to your future pipeline and the growth that you're outlining here. And so for people wondering, why is Sarah so focused on Gen Z? Well, because this is a critical pipeline of talent for you at your stores and your future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I shared earlier with Kevin and Tom, over 93% of our field population falls within this category. So very, very much a large portion, and one that we really want to make sure we understand on how to attract and inevitably retain, so that we have the pipeline we need for our leadership roles, and ultimately what we call our operators, who are responsible for the oversight and management of multiple shops. So in order to be an operator, you do have to have been a broista, as we call them, and go up the chain between shift lead, assistant manager, manager, and potentially regional manager before becoming an operator. So, we're talking about years of in-depth kind of infusion into our culture and our operations before becoming an operator.
Yeah. And if you can, and Tom, I know you're going to be looking at the social, but I think we've got some good questions coming in here through the social sphere that we'll throw over to Sarah. But Sarah, you've just talked to everyone about why the Gen Z population is so important, and 93% of your store employees, that represents them, right? What have you learned about this group? And can you, what's influenced them, et cetera, from your perspective?
Sure. It's pretty much a pretty timely conversation. I actually started doing some of this work back in late August of last year, and it kind of moved through, the course of the last 12 months. But this morning, the New York Times had posted some information from the Census Bureau that says that the average, or I should say median age of United States employees is now almost 39 years old, which in 1980 was 30. And so there is some concern around what we're going to do as the baby boomers continue to exit out, and our Gen Z population is not going to be able to fill all the gaps. So I felt pretty timely to kind of be looking a little bit more deeply at this group. But a couple of things here. One, I just wanted to note, I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. So I'm hyper aware of the experiential drama, if you will, that comes with becoming new to the employment workforce. My son, who's 21, actually worked for the company for a couple of years as he was leaving high school and kind of just trying to find his way. Now is actually in a trade school to become a pilot, but has since left the company to focus on that. And then my daughter, who is 17, just entered the workforce, and it was interesting to watch her apply for jobs and how she was filtering between the ones that she was interested in pursuing and those that she was interested in accepting interviews for. So it was pretty timely there. But what we saw over the course probably of the last 3 or 4 years, which kind of engulfed the COVID pandemic, and then as we came out of it, the crazy rates of inflation were that a lot of the applicants were kind of shifting their focus from highly high energy on what's the lifestyle impact that the job will have to what is the financial stability that the job can offer me, which hadn't been our focus in the past because we're known as, a very lively operation. We have a lot of fun. Maybe we don't pay the highest going rate for a broista, which we recognize our customers are very generous with kind of supplementing through, tips, but people have come and stayed because they enjoy coming to work and they enjoy the opportunity to give back to the communities. It's more of a feeling than it is a financial, but that has since started to kind of shift to where having a stable income is the driving force for this group, but they are not willing to relinquish the lifestyle expectations as well. So rather than seeing it as shifting levers or compromising, there's a lot more demand for both financial stability and lifestyle tailored to them. So, we kind of looked at that and said, okay, how are we going to have to kind of shift our how we attract new young employees and quite frankly older employees. It just that the majority of the people that apply for our jobs, because it is actually pretty physically taxing, are younger. How are we going to attract and then retain them? So there's a couple things that we did, and the list that you see on the screen here is kind of what kind of came out of two things. One, it was a grassroots research where I actually went in kind of like undercover boss mode and applied to, got offered a job, and then trained to be a barista in one of our Nashville operations. And I put undercover boss also in quotes because the operator of that shop, as well as the manager and assistant manager, were all aware of what I was doing because I want to make sure I got offered the job. So heaven forbid I screw up the interview, right? And then they not offer me the job, or I wait a few weeks and I haven't heard back, and then I act like a normal Gen Zer and I go somewhere else and look for a different job, right? So they knew, and I spent the next 8 weeks in the shop, 3 days a week, 6 hours a day, training to be a broista. And so through that time, I had casual conversations with the employees, just kind of observed what was going on when they would have conversations with their leaders, their coworkers, their customers, to get a sense of what they enjoyed and what they didn't, and how we could upsell that part of the experience. And then I combined that with doing some online research, just with some institutions like Harvard, PwC, places like that, to see kind of what came out of it. And these were the 8 areas that we really noted. So, we can go through them if you had some other questions you wanted to ask first, or more about my experience.
Well, I think, Sarah, I want to go back here and just kind of look at some of the questions here, and there's one that's gotten like 4 thumbs up around it, but it's a question that sticks to just when you're hiring and growing, when you're hiring people in and growing them, and only store managers are those that come up through the system in that regard. How do you keep fresh ideas within the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple things that we do right now. One of them is what we have the operator advisory board and the franchise advisory board, both of which have kind of cross-pollination of ideas. Our franchisees are really great on the entrepreneurial side. That's ultimately why they chose to franchise with us back in the day. And they have 10 plus years of experience working for us and doing some of their own research on what's working. So they often collaborate with the operators and the managers and other leaders that we have internally. And we engage with them from a headquarters standpoint on a monthly basis to share ideas and talk through different options. And it's amazing how many new ideas actually come from just operators being in different parts of the country and having completely diverse population of employees, which is something we're also really spending quite a bit of time on with our director of DEI, looking at the various detailed communities that people are working from and how they approach work-life balance and even the drinks that they enjoy more than others in different parts of the country.
So the franchise advisory board, I would assume,
Mhm.
is comprised of half of or whatever percentage are franchise owned and operated. It's a group
Yeah.
of franchisors or
Yes.
franchisees in that regard.
Mhm.
And then you've got on the operator side, who constitutes an operator? Are those the managers of those stores, or are they employees across a select swath?
Yeah. So our titles are a little bit different than probably the traditional in the QSR world, but our operators would be kind of like the regional directors, regional managers. So operators oversee up to typically 4 or 5 shops. We have a couple on the West Coast that oversee up to 10 shops, but they're responsible for the full-on operations, the P&L, everything related to a larger number of shops. And then we have what we call regional managers, which are if an operator has more than, say, 3 locations, they have a regional manager that helps with a little bit more of the weekly operational requirements of a smaller number of stores on their behalf. And then the managers are those that run the day-to-day operations in an individual shop.
Mhm. And then, so going back here, thanks for clarifying that,
Yeah,
Sarah. And
sure.
another question was, how long does it take someone who comes in as a new employee? What's that path look like from going new employee all the way up to perhaps being the manager of a shop?
Yeah, so management of shops, it's varied more recently than it has in the past just because of our aggressive growth. But ideally, we want someone to be a barista for a minimum of 6 to 12 months before they elevate to what we would call a shift lead. So a little bit of added responsibility there. They do exactly what their job says, which is they're kind of responsible for ensuring that the flow of the shift is successful and taking low-level concerns from customers and employees. And then from there, it's 6 to 12 months for each position thereafter. So assistant manager and then a manager. So you can expect most of the time to take 2 to 3 years to become a manager of a location. And granted, the locations are relatively small. We're not talking like restaurant size locations. We're talking more between 20 and maybe 35 employees per shop. Now volumes can be exceptionally high, but from managing a team of people, we're talking 20 to 35 employees.
Got it. And then, thank you for being so open to taking these like comments that are just coming in from the audience here, Sarah. But, something I was curious about, one of our colleagues, Tom and Mike and Zeta's colleagues, Carol Morrison, led a research study for us on engaging older workers. And I know you were part of the, when we shared it back to the CHRO board, some of those findings. But, one of the things that I was astonished to learn is that the large gap between available workers and jobs that are opening out there, a large portion of that gap, both in the United States and the United Kingdom, is attributed to people who are 50 years plus who are not actively in the workforce, whatever reason that is. And, we've been talking about the demographic shifts and the aging population as well. And so there's going to be a lot more as the years progress, a lot more older people available to work than there are younger people available to work. Do you have plans to, and I know that you do have older workers working in your shops, but do you have plans or strategies involved to, target the quote unquote, the slightly older generation, workers out there?
I don't know that we have any specific targeted to an age demographic. I would say that we still are predominantly a part-time workforce. So that oftentimes doesn't work well for that age range. They're looking for full-time in our experience anyway. And the work that they do, they spend, 5 to 7 hours on their feet. So we're also, looking for people who have the desire to have that kind of physical activity. So we actually have really had great success with that population of individuals who desire both of those things, to be physically active and work part-time hours with that type of flexibility. we just find they aren't able to stay around with us as long because the part-time hours just don't work out for them more than anything else.
So regarding the all of the things that we're seeing here on the screen,
Yeah.
I'm reflecting on these, and to me, technology native, the one on the top left, applies very much to Gen Z and to some extent millennials. The rest of these, I would say, really could apply to everyone in the workforce to varying degrees. And I think the call out here is that at least some of them are more prominent with the younger generations, millennials, and particularly Gen Z. So, for example, engaged in political and social activism, concerned about equity and inclusion. I think if you were to, most of the surveys that we've seen, maybe those are stronger with the younger generation, but it's not like those shouldn't be part of the EVP, the employee value prop, for all of your employees.
Yeah.
Really, to me, only technology native, which is just a fact about younger people, that they grew up with technology that those of us in the older generations didn't. That's the only one that sort of is specific to that generation. Can you comment on that, and maybe just comment on your broader EVP as an organization, including even corporate employees, and how all of these maybe are relevant to everyone?
Yeah. So specifically on the technology native, I called that out because there's a couple of things that we've noted, and it's been a lot in as we evaluate kind of our application and hiring process, that from a technology standpoint, a couple things were noted. One is snackable content. So their attention span is, no offense, the size of a gnat. I mean, they truly, and I love them dearly, but they really don't have a very large attention span. So anything that's more than 2 to 3 minutes in content that they're observing, they're onto something else. And that lends itself also to this idea of quickly switching through apps and wanting to do one thing for a second and move on to something else just for stimulation. So we had to really pare down our application process to something that shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes to complete. Which wasn't necessarily the case before. And if you think about HR, they want to put all of their compliance information and all of their fine print and all of that stuff up front to get it through before they go through the experiential onboarding piece. Well, that doesn't bode well for this generation. So we spent a lot of time looking at how we can narrow that down to a few clicks, which lends itself to the other thing we noted, which is they're very used to one-click purchases. So they're also, their expectation is that they should be able to do pretty much any activity with one click. Also not super conducive to walking through various stages of applying and becoming an employee and doing some onboarding. So we continue to look at how we can do that. And just kind of going back to my daughter, who's 17, and even my son, quite frankly, because he applied for a different part-time job when we moved. If the application was taking too long, they would get frustrated and close out of it. And by too long, something over 5 minutes. And they also noted that that attention span piece, if they hadn't received a response back, whether it be auto-generated, whether it be a human being, within about 24 hours, they were thinking about whether or not they wanted to apply somewhere else that might be a little bit faster in responding. And then if they hadn't talked to a live person within 2 to 3 days, they were convinced that someone else was hired and it wasn't them. So that's posed a little bit of a challenge for us, just in the volume of people we're hiring, to be able to create those triggers that keep their attention long enough to give us, 7 to 10 days to go through, hundreds of applications still, which we're blessed to receive. To actually schedule interviews and make some job offers. So we're continuing to fine tune that process.
Sarah, and just for everyone to understand what Sarah just showed on the things that they've learned from their workforce that they really want as part of the that you're embedding into your EVP, for instance. You're going to share in just a little bit what are some of the things that you're doing to address those, which is awesome. But can you talk to this right here? Because this, I think, is a very interesting statistic on why Gen Z is so critical right now to you as well.
Yeah, I know this is a little bit outdated, but I felt like it still spoke to kind of where we are even today, and it's this gap in the QSR world for just workers in general. So, 1.7 million teens were working in the restaurants in 2020, but that was exactly the same as it was 13 years prior. But QSR establishments are increasing at a rate of 16% over the same time period. So we're continuing to go backwards in the pool of candidates we have available to us in that age group, which is a crucial group for us. And then if you break that down even further and break that into two subgroups in that generation, we're finding that the more mature version, or the 20 to 24-year-olds, are holding out for the higher wages to go along with their flexibility. And so those 16 to 19-year-olds are filling in the gap. And as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, there's also some challenges with people under the age of 18 and having, parental involvement and how that applies to the workforce. So there's a lot of different factors going into how we recruit and some of the things that different folks are kind of expecting from their employers.
One of the questions that came up in the chat a little bit ago, I wanted to hit back on, since we're talking about some of the numbers here, and that's turnover in your industry and at Dutch Bros in particular. I mean, that's another challenge. I think famously QSR and retail customer service positions more broadly have pretty high turnover. So how have you addressed that challenge? Someone asked that in the chat.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We consider our turnover high, but we consider our turnover high as compared to where it's been in the past. Our turnover rate is just a tick over 70%, which in the QSR world is like, oh my God, what's your secret? Well, for us, that's actually relatively high. And it has increased over time, but has kind of stabilized. And we've seen in the last quarter actually a dip in our turnover rate by a couple percentage points. But I think for our group of people, making sure that we don't lose the fun in the work is what's ultimately going to do it. We're still working on competitive wages and kind of explaining how that whole process works across the country, and how generous our customers are in providing tips to our employees who rely heavily on that income as well. But as long as we continue to reinforce the established brand and the culture, I think that's what's keeping us from continuing to increase that number. And for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to go through a Dutch Bros, once you do, all of this will make a lot of sense.
Yeah, we've seen, you've shown photos, Sarah, to those of us who've not had a chance because we don't live in the regions
Yeah.
operating, on what that experience is like. Can you just share a story real quick so people can get an idea of what that is?
Yeah. I actually had a colleague of mine who used to be in the shops. We also do a lot of, just side note, we do a lot of internal recruiting for our HQ population as well. So our young professionals entering into HQ are often pulled from our shops. Not all the time, but sometimes. Turnover rate was 70, Lisa. I just saw that pop up. So her story was that some years ago when she was in the shops, she had the opportunity to open one morning, and a gentleman had come through who had never been through a Dutch Bros before, and she had a conversation, asked him how his day was going, wanted to know a little bit more about him, make sure he was comfortable engaging with her. And he mentioned that he was new to the area, but that he didn't have any family. He had moved for a job and he was just having a rough day, and that he just needed a cup of coffee. And she said, well, do you mind if I ask your name? And he's like, my name is Stephen. And she's like, Stephen, it's nice to meet you. This cup of coffee's on me. She didn't have to ask permission from anybody else. She was a barista, but she had the opportunity to bless him with a free drink as a new customer and just as someone who needed a lift. Next day comes around, he comes through in the morning and she's working, and she said, Stephen, it's so nice to see you. And he said, I have to let you in on a little secret. You are the only person since I've moved who has called me by my first name, because nobody knows who I am. People haven't taken the opportunity to learn who I was, except you. And it's so nice to hear someone actually use my name in my new home. And so that's the type of experience that we try to provide, so that every person who comes through the window in that moment is the only person that matters, so that they can leave feeling even better than when they got there.
You know, Sarah, that story, I think everyone it pulls at your heartstrings, but as a geeky researcher, what I'm leading into is what you had mentioned around the autonomy piece.
Yeah.
That person had felt empowered to be able to do this. How do you make clear the decision rights or what they can do without going up the flagpole in that regard?
Yeah.
How is that instilled? Yeah.
Most of our employees were prior customers, obviously, because they know about it. So they see how that's demonstrated from the opposite side of the window. But we talk about it a lot too. We say that, you know, in order to have customers feel like they have a reason to come back, we have to show them that we care. And by doing so, we want to be generous, but also know that we're trying to run a business. So on a regular basis, they talk about it. There's actually buttons on our menu that are for bad day drink, birthday drink, those kinds of things that kind of align with our app as well. But there are a couple that are specific for broistas to use. And they recognize that they have to use that with care so that it doesn't go away. So they've just been really good to respect that it's a balancing act of doing it to create impact and not becoming an expectation.
Awesome. And you know I know there's a lot of things you're offering, and you know, we've got, you know, the time's flying by as usual here. I hope that Tom doesn't smack me upside the head here, because this is his call and he's invited me as a guest. But I'm wondering, Tom, do people have the opportunity to annotate on this slide?
No, we don't do that on the Next Practices weekly call series. But nonetheless, there's a lot here. I got the sense too that you mapped these to the 8 characteristics that you shared earlier of the Gen Z. So would love to hear from you, Sarah. What are some of the highlights that you'd really like to draw attention to? You mentioned the sort of short trainings, the short attention span for the younger generation. So providing snackable trainings makes a lot of sense. But what are some other ones maybe you'd like to speak to here?
I think kind of, let's see, I'm trying to remember what I named each of them, but down on the third box on the right is kind of a fun one. It says developing the creative collective and building Dutch Bros Radio. One of the things that we've really leaned into this year around that kind of identity, employees being able to tailor things to their experience and having new opportunities that keep their attention while doing the work that's kind of expected of them from their job description, if you will. But the Creative Collective is a group of employees that submitted to be our artists as well. So they're all people who work within the 4 walls. So they're all broistas or shift leads or assistant managers, that type of thing. But they are individuals who create art that we then use for stickers. As a matter of fact, I believe it was either the May or June sticker was actually drawn by one of the members of our Creative Collective, as well as some of our ads. So shoot videos for us. And they're all done either on their phone or very, very organically, because that's just the reality of what the population does. And they're extremely talented. So we've had a lot of fun curating content from our Creative Collective group. And the Dutch Bros Radio is similar. It's just with music. So kind of budding musicians have the opportunity to submit songs unique to them that they would like to have us play over the speakers in our Dutch Bros shops, which always starts really great conversations. And I'm sure many of them, you know, hope that one day an agent runs through and hears their music and gives them an opportunity. But those are 2 fun projects that we've been working on this year. I saw a comment pop up about the mental health first aid training, which is in the box over there on the left of that. That's a training that we offer to all of our employees in leadership, both in the field and at HQ. And that's how to support people who may be in a mental health crisis. We don't suggest that we're trying to make them counselors by any stretch of the imagination, but we want to help them be able to identify when they see signs that someone might be in a crisis or needs someone to talk to, and how to either point them to the appropriate resources or ask the appropriate questions. And we've actually had quite a bit of success in that program this year. A lot of interest from our field employees, field leaders. And then we're looking to complement that by launching the Calm app as a benefit or a perk to our entire population of employees in 2024. That's our goal.
Yeah, and Sarah, just real quickly, can you hit upon this, because and then Tom and I want to pivot and talk about AI, because that is such a hot button topic right now. But another hot button topic is around flexibility of work, and clearly your employees, the stores, need to show up on work, but and we've been emphasizing, our research continues to show you've got to think beyond the where, especially for workers who can only get work done on a location. How can you talk about that, providing flexibility in work schedule? What does that look like? And maybe you can expound upon other thits too around that.
Sure. So kind of from two different angles, one from our headquarters employees and then one from our field employees. So from our field population, it's always been something that we look at as one of our missions is to provide a compelling future for our employees. But that compelling future doesn't necessarily mean that it's within Dutch Bros. So the flexibility that we offer in scheduling is so they can pursue their passion and their dream. We have a lot of college students, for example, who need to have flexibility in their schedule so they can continue to pursue their degree, which will ultimately lead them to the career that they're looking for. So that's something that we offer. But then also with that flexibility, we look for those that are aspiring to continue to ascend the ladder internally and offering the opportunities that fit them best, whether that be in the shop in order to grow in a particular skill set, or if that is to continue to work in the shop for as many hours as possible. So flexibility on that in that space. But on the HQ side, hybrid and remote work is something that we have opened up to our population. They can only live and work in states where we have operations. So, they can't live in Maine and expect to be able to work for us, because we want them to be near a location so that they can still experience what our field employees are going through. But HR, for example, is more than 50% of them are remote employees, including myself, from our headquarters, which is located in Grants Pass. And that's been a game changer for our ability to attract and retain professional talent, because Grants Pass is a population of 30,000 employees. It's where the two brothers who started the business grew up, but it's not the mecca for talent.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's consistent with both our research and all the conversations we have with our members, where the sweet spot seems to be offering as much flexibility as makes sense for the business. So in your case, having the requirement be you can't live in a state where you don't have operations, so that you experience Dutch Bros, can go in, get the coffee, see what the culture's like in the store, since that's what you're all about. But at the same time, not requiring people to come in certain 5 days a week if they're corporate, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, even specific days, allowing for remote work, allowing for the flexibility and lifestyle that provides. So it really is sort of, I think, threading the needle, if you will, but finding that sweet spot for folks in the corporate offices.
I'll admit that it still is challenging from a communication standpoint and a collaboration standpoint. It's certainly not all roses, but we're working through it, and folks are really grateful for it, and we see the uptick in our talent and our diversity as a result. But we continue to look for ways and tools that can help everyone feel like they're in the same place, even though they're geographically distributed.
I'm glad you mentioned diversity there as part of the uptick in the broader talent pool you've got. That was a question James just asked in the chat. One quick clarification, Vanessa asked in the chat, can you share who provided the mental health first aid training? Was that an outside provider?
Yeah, it's an outside firm that provides the materials, and then will train a trainer for you. And I will get the name. I am remiss in not knowing. If
you want, you could send it to me after the call, and we can put it up on the show notes.
You got it
for this session.
You got it.
Perfect. So let's transition, Sarah, about, AI and whether it's generative AI or perhaps other types of AI. How is Dutch Bros experimenting with it or using it to improve work processes, business processes, without, affecting its unique culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember the original study that you guys were doing and some of the questions you had asked. And initially I felt slightly embarrassed to think that we're so behind the times, but in fact, we're with a majority of people trying to just get an understanding of where AI is headed and where we want to invest our time and our energy. And there's two areas right now that are specific to HR that we're looking at on a very fundamental basis. One is related to kind of GPT chat. And using that tool in limited fashion, but complementing that with the human element. And we're doing some skills cloud work for those of you who are Workday users, where we're trying to build out the skills in our database for every position we have. And we have quite a few unique positions. And what we did was we did an allocation using Workday skills list, and then we actually engaged the GPT chat function to create a list for us. And then we're cross-referencing those to see where we can land with a robust skill set without having a laundry list. Excuse me. So that's what our TA team is doing right now, just to kind of dip their toes in that space. And the other is in our HR service center team. We use Zendesk. For those of you who are familiar with Zendesk, it's our ticketing system. And we're starting to use AI to help prioritize the tasks for our employees. Sorry about that.
Oh, you go.
I need some water.
Yeah, that's okay. Sarah, I've been doing this the whole time. So, just join the rest of us. That's okay.
I'm surprised I don't need coffee. What's happening? I just have water right now. But anyway, so we're working through building out our Zendesk ticketing system to have the volume, because our volume continues to increase for both employees and customers, to have AI basically prioritize the tickets on our behalf so that employees only see the most prioritized task in that moment. So we have, SLAs with all of our cross-functional teams of a 24-hour turnaround time for responses. So while we have some auto-generated responses, we also know that there are unique circumstances that need to be prioritized above maybe some that come in first. So those are the two areas that we're starting with.
Got it. And are there skill set differences, or when you think about HR supporting, how maybe the work processes may change or work may change? What are you looking for in HR that might be different?
I don't know if different necessarily in developed skill sets, but more what we're looking for is those that are willing to adapt. Again, going back to our growth strategy, HR tends to have very rigid expectations and programs and laws that they have to follow. But we don't have that luxury as we grow, because with all the employment laws that are changing, plus our growth model and how we enter into new states, having employees that are openly willing to be agile and adapt and willing to learn new skills on the job. We say sometimes we are flying the plane while we're building it. That's very true. But if you're game, then we are willing to invest the time and energy in you to do that. So that's something that we're looking at. And then problem solving skills, which goes along with that, right? Just that willingness to try new things and look for root cause and identify a problem and not just point it out, but then look for solutions. Those are skills that fundamentally are easy to build off of. If people
Kevin, I'm glad you asked her the question about the HR skills and what you look for folks to join your team, because it allows me to surface a question I had sort of skipped over from the chat. Shannon earlier had asked, given your growth, what is the sort of cadence and factors that go into when you add and grow out the HR team itself? So is it number of new employees, the ratio of HR to total employees? Is it based on stores? What's the driving factors for growing the HR function?
Yeah, we have a shared service model, so it differs depending on which area of HR you're working on. We are going more on the ratio side for what we fondly call our HROC, which is our HR Operations Center, our HROC team, which are the first level, first line of defense for employment questions. And that team is right now on a ratio of about 1 to 1,500 employees, and not FTEs, because we have a really, large population of part-time employees, but 1 to 1,500 on a headcount basis. The rest of the team, we're trying to stabilize and not grow the teams in the centers of excellence. So our health and welfare, compensation, our talent acquisition teams, by ratios, but looking at how we can stabilize through automation, self-service, and vendor relations. So we're looking more to lean into those now that we have, I would say, between 5 and 10 people in each of those centers of excellence. We feel like that's a healthy range, and would like to start looking at other ways to create efficiencies.
I just want to comment also, going back to the two ways that you said you're sort of already experimenting and using AI. One, the sort of triaging with the priorities. I think that's a great, way to use it to increase efficiency. So I think that's a great use case. And the other, in both cases, I think they're safe ways to be entering into this new world of generative AI. And so I just want to give you kudos for being willing to do that. We're finding a lot of organizations are not doing that, and they're, and there's certainly the public chat GPT. There are issues around using it, putting company information into it and so on. But I think it's great to hear that you're taking an approach that is allowing people to use it in a sensible way to gain efficiency, to gain greater productivity. So kudos on that.
Yeah, and I think I attribute a lot of that to our overall culture of a fail forward culture. We allow people to be brave to a certain extent, and try things that maybe they don't work all the time, but we learn from them. And so folks are more than willing to put forward ideas and thoughts and could do's, and then given some leash to try some of those things. So with that in mind, I think that's why we've been able to do some of the things that we've been able to do.
Well, Sarah, as we round the corner here, how about you taking us around the corner? When you think about, over the next, through the rest of this year and into next year, what's a big bet you're placing on HR? I mean, what will advance Dutch Bros most in what you are focusing your team on? And, we'll focus on that first, and then we might have a follow-up. Let's see.
Sure. Gosh, there's quite a few things that we're hoping to work on, but we know there's only so much time and so much opportunity. But from an HR perspective, we are starting to adventure into the talent marketplace idea, where we hope at the first part of the year to launch that through Workday, where folks can kind of like LinkedIn, build out their profile and get endorsements from their leaders, and really kind of sell themselves on the skill sets that they have. That gig economy idea, although in and of itself is not something that we've necessarily adopted yet, we know that people are doing things out elsewhere and gaining skills that we just aren't aware of. And so we want to try to create more opportunities for employees to move around the organization, but creating that awareness. And also for our field, because we're growing so fast, we want to know what people desire as far as locations to live. We're saturated on the West Coast, but we have so much talent because it's so deep and long that we'd love for some of those people to be able to move to other parts of the country to establish our brand, but we don't know who those people are. And so we're hopeful that employees will engage with this talent marketplace and promote their desires, their skill sets, their opportunities for mentorship that might cross-pollinate ideas and people.
And so that would be applicable for both your company owned and operated store employees as well as the corporate, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Tom, are you about to intervene here?
I was just going to say that's certainly an area of talent mobility and internal talent marketplaces that a lot of I4CP members have been leaning into over the years. We've done a lot of research on that here at I4CP. Some organizations sort of focus it mostly on full-time or part-time roles. Other organizations focus more on sort of smaller gigs and projects, but some focus on both at the same time, whether they're using Workday or another platform. So great to hear you're moving in that direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. And Sarah, one last thing, what do you see? What's a big trend you see that you are you most focused on that you feel could affect HR most as an industry going forward?
Well, one of the things that's really top of mind for us right now is just employment law in general. There's so many changes happening, both at the state level and at the federal level, and quite a few that are only half-baked that employers are expecting to implement when they don't really have, all the details listed out. I'm sure many folks are acutely aware of the current situation with the I-9s. There's been a lot of chat even among I4CP members about having to go back with remote employees and visually look at IDs again, and they don't actually have it fully baked, but they have an expectation that everybody be compliant, by the end of the summer. So we're wrestling with how to, be A+ students, if you will, but doing it, completely blind. And a lot of the West Coast states are want to just be their own countries themselves and have all, the exceptions to other laws. So no two states are running their employment laws the same, and they're constantly changing. So we're spending quite a bit of time in that space.
Interesting that you brought up that one about the I-9s. That's an area, I believe, where we just recently had an I4CP member flash call. So for any members that are on this call, if you missed that and maybe perked up your ears when you heard about the I-9 issue that Sarah just mentioned, go back in the archives. I think the recording for that should be available. If I'm not mistaken.
I really
well,
was.
it's there. You can go back and see what some of your fellow I4CP members were chatting about it. Well, Sarah, Kevin, I want to thank you both. This has been a great conversation. So Kevin, thank you for leading the way here in this discussion.
Oh, it's my privilege. I was just a passenger. You and Sarah did it. It was great.
And Sarah, thank you so much for all that you shared. The focus on Gen Zs, which is such a large part of your employment population, and then all the practices that you're using there, as well as the other topics that we covered. I guess I'll just close things out by reminding everyone that we do have an annual conference here at I4CP in late March each year. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I encourage folks, if you haven't registered for that for 2024, to please do so. Also a reminder that our current study that's out in the field, we had put the link to that in the chat earlier on in the call, is on AI and HR, a very timely topic. Hopefully everyone on the call can participate in that study. And again, those that do so will get first access to the data. So thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Sarah. Thanks again, Kevin and Zeta. Great to have you with us. Have a great week, everyone, and a great weekend coming up. Thanks, everyone.